itself for the first round of questions. Despite the clear and vocal calls for a comprehensive strategy, U.S. policy in Iraq and in Syria, the administration continues to treat the conflicts as separate, or at least as situations that should be dealt with one at a time. And this is either a fundamental misunderstanding of the issues at hand, or willful ignorance due to a political calculation, namely the administration's misguided and naive nuclear negotiations with Iran. It must acknowledge that airstrikes alone will not be sufficient to defeat ISIL in either Iraq or in Syria, that Assad must be removed from power, and that Iran, even if it is the enemy of our enemy, it is still an enemy. And in a hearing yesterday, former Ambassador to Syria Robert Ford testified that if the United States allies with Iran, we are playing into ISIL's narrative and helping in its recruitment. So I asked the panelists, do you believe that we are cooperating with Iran directly or indirectly against ISIL? And if so, is this helpful to our national security interests? Dr. Jones, General, whoever wants to tackle this.
Sure. I will start. Look, I think in particular in Iraq, there are areas where the U.S. has worked with Iranian-backed militia organizations in various areas. The campaign has involved a complex set of state governments, including Iraq, as well as sub-state actors, Kurds, but also Iranian-backed Shia militias. So I think the answer to your question is yes, the U.S. has cooperated somewhat with Iran, particularly at the sub-state level. There have been discussions as well about the political issues, Sunni Shia issues with the Iraqi government that Iran has been involved in. I think ultimately the U.S. is in a very complicated position here, but I do agree with your comments that a strong allied relationship with Iran, if that's the direction we go in, would be very counterproductive and would certainly walk into an would certainly help with the ISIL narrative.
Thank you,
exactly
sir.
what they're saying.
Yeah, I agree with the doctor about Iraq, so I won't repeat it. But in Syria, I think really the elephant in the room in Syria with the administration's reluctance to provide assistance to the Free Syrian Army, despite a very credible and experienced national security team recommended that, as I pointed out in my testimony, I think is Iran. It is the elephant in the room, in the sense that we've been, because the nuclear talks and establishing a deal, I think, is the unstated foreign policy major objective of the administration. It has handcuffed our ability to do what we should have done in Syria because of a potential setback from the Iranians. So de facto, our policy decisions in Syria have certainly helped Iran, bona fide, established client state with Syria, contributes to their expansionist policies, and certainly encourages them to do what they are doing right now in Yemen, which if they are able to achieve what they want to achieve in Yemen, political and military control in Yemen, then they change the strategic balance of power in the region by gaining control of the strategic waterway at the Gulf of Aden, at the Straits of Bab al-Mandab, and affect and control and leverage shipping that comes in and out of the Suez Canal, a major objective for the Iranians that they would not have thought of without the progress that they've made in Syria.
Thank you. And Doctor?
Thank you. You know, I think part of the challenge is that our regional partners, who are absolutely necessary to any successful outcome in Syria, have until very recently been pretty divided themselves on the question of what should follow Assad and what kind of political order they would see as a desirable end state. And in many ways, their elevation of the Iranian threat above the threat of ISIS, above the threat of political Islam, is a product of just the last year or so. But up until recently, different Arab states were supporting different factions in the Syrian opposition. And I think that vastly complicated any ability we had to forge unity among them. Now, there might well have been a time early in the Syrian conflict when a more forward-leaning American policy would have created that unified front, but I think we're long past that now, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. I have other questions, but I'll wait for the next round. Mr. Deutsch, our ranking member.